Hey there, friend, and welcome to another episode. I am enjoying such an incredible spring day. So, I am recording this in late April in Oregon, and the Pacific Northwest can have some pretty brutal winters. And actually, this winter wasn't too bad, but we're talking lots of rain, lots of gray skies, lots of jacket wearing situations. And just for the past few weeks, we've been blessed with clear blue skies and perfect 70-degree weather. There's zillions of flowers out everywhere. There's just so many colors. And it's amazing what a good mood weather like this puts you in. So, I hope you are also enjoying some lovely weather today. Now, this episode is about a topic that was a pretty big deal for me to figure out, this idea of understanding how you are wired to act and be as a person, and then using that to your advantage, kind of building a business around that wiring rather than the other way around of trying to force your wiring into this format that you think is going to be better for your business. This is a big one for me because I would describe myself as like an unlikely entrepreneur, or I wouldn't say atypical. I would just say unlikely. It was never something that I dreamed of doing, and I didn't have role models, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I still have moments. In fact, earlier today, I did have a moment of thinking like, wait, is my freeform style really the best way for business? But I have come to understand that the way I'm wired is kind of like my code for how to create a business that really works. And so I hope you enjoy this episode where I share what my journey was like understanding this, and then the tools that I use to better understand how I was wired, and then using that to kind of shift the way I run my business. Now, I do talk about this a lot in the context of having a business because that's when I figured it out. But all of this applies to your work as well. If you're, working at a business or employed, this idea of honoring how you're wired definitely will apply to that as well. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Emma Stratton Show. This is a podcast that's all about sharing unconventional advice that will inspire you to create a business that reflects your true self, so you can experience greater freedom and abundance in your work and life. And I'm your host, Emma. One of the things I really believe, and I know to be true, is that the key to your personal definition of success lies within you already. It is already inside you, and a lot of it has to do with how you are naturally wired. And by following and honoring the way that you're naturally wired, that is a sure way to eventually reach the kind of success that your heart truly desires. Now, this is something that it took me a long time to learn, because actually for most of my adult life, from college, post-college, to early navigating my career, and even starting my own business, I considered myself as someone who didn't really have what it takes to be super successful. I didn't really think I had those natural success traits. I always thought that in order to be successful in business or in career, you had to be driven and super productive and really good at numbers and kind of hardcore. That's sort of what I thought you had to be in order to get success and have a business and make lots of money or really top that career ladder. I didn't identify with any of that. I'm someone who was kind of always an artist. From when I was little, I was into drawing and writing and traveling and exploring and being free and not really working. That's kind of how I've always been. And so I assumed that if I wanted to be successful eventually, because I knew I had to make money at some point as an adult in my life, I figured that I was going to have to change who I was and how I operated in order to be successful. I was pretty sure that's what I had to do. But I had a huge eye-opening experience in the early years of my business, or midway, when I started getting some coaching, working with some business coaches, and starting to understand that the way I'm naturally wired is actually my secret weapon. These are my strengths, not my weaknesses. These are the things that are actually going to help me find success. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this today because I think that a lot of us assume parts of the way we naturally are aren't great, like, oh God, I wish I, worked harder, or I wish I could be more productive, or I didn't daydream so much. So how it started for me was, it was in a business coaching course that I took. And one of the things they asked us to do was to take a couple assessments to understand how we were wired. And I thought, okay, it's kind of weird. I'll do it. I had never really done anything like that before. But we did two assessments. So one was the Clifton Strengths Finder, which is pretty popular. You may have taken it already. I know it's something that people do in careers and things like that. But I did the Clifton Strengths Finder, which was pretty cool. But the big unlock for me was actually the Kolbe assessment. So I'd never heard of the Kolbe assessment. Now, a little bit about how I would describe myself. So I said that I didn't think I was the type of person who could be successful in business. So I'm an artist at the core. So that means I like to not work. I don't want to sit at a desk for hours and hours. So even though when I was employed, I had desk jobs, I never stayed late. Isn't that kind of wild? How many years did I work in an office? I don't know, 10 years or something. And I never stayed late. I always left at 5. I was like, this is enough. I am not working late. I always left at 5 because I have a life to live. So that was one thing that I assumed was a failing, because of course loads of people would still be sitting there in the office grinding it out until 6 or 7. But I never did that. I never wanted to do that. So I'm not into hardcore working long hours. Never have been, just can't do it. The other thing that I thought was not great about me is that I can't do process very well. I find it almost impossible to create a process around anything. And I don't love following processes either, because they feel really rigid and lifeless to me as a creative. I like to kind of do things my own way and be a maverick or whatnot. So that was really hard when I was heading up I was like an associate creative director working in-house, and I was having to create some processes around how we were doing things. And I just couldn't do it. Even the simplest processes was bad. And I thought, oh God, in business, you need to be good at processes. And I suck at that. So I sucked at processes, and I didn't like to work long hours. The other thing about me is that I don't love to research things deeply. So even when starting a new business, there's a lot of advice do informational research, interview people, do some market research, look what's out there, create a business plan, do all these things. Not me. I just was like, all right, I'm going to start a business. Let me just start trying this thing and start doing it. Even making decisions like finding an Airbnb when I'm traveling, I don't like to spend hours looking at all the options. I get really tired and bored of it. And instead, I prefer to make a rather quick gut reaction. So I'm all about making quick decisions. I do not like doing lots of research. Again, that must be horrible. You've got to make lots of research to make informed decisions. So that was another reason why. And finally, the last piece, and this is related to not loving to work all the time. I don't love being super busy and having a full calendar. That actually feels really oppressive to me and drains me very deeply. Again, how do I expect to have a successful business if I don't like to have a full, busy calendar? So you can see why I thought that I had to change these things about myself. Now, I felt a bit validated when I started taking these assessments. So the Strengths Finder one, it's about elevating your 5 strengths, and they cover different areas, but mine were really validating because they were basically all about big picture thinking, new ideas, and being a visionary. So every single one was about, hey, you're good at the big picture. And there was one about connecting with people. So it's like, I'm good with relationships and connecting with people, but at the core, I'm a big picture person and I am looking at the future. And that was really validating because here I had chosen this path of being a messaging strategist for tech companies, helping people see the big picture, simplify their stories. So when I found that out, I was like, oh, good. I'm on the right path. Like the work I'm doing is connected to my strengths. So that was really good. But the Kolbe assessment was the piece that really surprised me because it helped me see that these ways that I act around making quick decisions and not researching things, those types of things were actually just fine. So the Kolbe test has four sliding scales, and there are numbers like I think from 0 to 10, and there is no good or bad score. So it's not like you want to get the highest score in these, or if you get the low score, that's bad. It's just helping you see how you're wired. Now, one of those scores was about how fast do you start something new? So are you quick to start something, or are you very slow and measured to start something because you're getting all the facts? Now, I was off the charts quick start. I was practically a 10, I think. It was about as high as you could go. And I learned from my coach that actually most entrepreneurs are quick starts. They are not afraid to take a big risk and dive into something. And this is actually a strength. And that was really eye-opening to me because I thought that the way I kind of did things at the last minute was bad. So that was a huge shift for me because it got me thinking, okay, the way I am is not bad. It's simply the way I am, and there are strengths. And if there are any gaps, I can fill those in. So these assessments, the Strength Finder and Kolbe, were really great data points to help validate that I have strengths and I am, good for business. It's just a different flavor. But the third piece was more inward. It was more on that energetic level. So this was something that I figured out really through meditation and self-reflection, at really trying to honor who I am at the core. Like, who am I on that soul level? Who I've always been. And when I'm at my happiest, this is how I show up. Who is that? What is she like? And for me, at the core, my natural wiring is all about play and exploration and fun, openness. And I know this to be true because ever since I was young, I've traveled. I've taken many trips. I traveled extensively through my childhood, and as a teenager and a young adult, it's like my favorite thing to do, just being open and somewhere new. It just lights me up in this way. And play and exploration is really who I am. Now, when I really grasped this and understood that, yes, at the core, this is my truth, this is who I am, I started to see how that was showing up in my business, like that need to have an open schedule or to not be grinding at the desk really comes from this place of, no, I'm here on this earth to play and explore and experience new things. So that's how I really got an understanding of how I'm naturally wired on both a data-driven level by using the Strengths Finder and the Kolbe assessment, and also on an energetic level through self-reflection and meditation and really knowing who I am. And that piece, I think you know as well, on the deepest level. Who are you? What do you enjoy? When are you most you? And I think you can think back to times when you have just felt so good and free and in the flow, and everything felt right and you were really just doing you, what was that like? Who are you on that deeper level? So now let's take it back to what do we do with this information? So, for the first piece about really understanding how you're wired, I think is important just in validating and reminding you that, hey, these are your strengths. These are what make you awesome. They are not weaknesses, they are your strengths. So, I believe that we're all different for a reason. We're not all the same. God, can you imagine if we were all the same? It would just be so boring. Life is all about variety and we need variety. And so I believe that we are all wired differently so that we can each make unique contributions in the world. We need all different flavors and styles of things, and our differences and our unique ways of being are necessary, right? They're necessary. So the first piece is I want you to be validated by your natural wiring and recognize it so that you know it's important, because it is. I think it's so easy to look at what others are doing and look at other role models and look at stuff out there and think that we're not doing it right, or we're not enough, or we're not good enough, or we need to change. And it's not true. It's less about having to change and it's more about knowing who you are and doubling down on it. I think that's really what we have to do. So once I found out what my wiring was, I started moving towards alignment with that. How can I honor my natural wiring? How can I infuse that into my business? How can I make my business work for the way I'm wired rather than the other way around? So I've shared this before. In the first few years of my business, I felt that I had to just grind it out. I sort of thought that, okay, the more hours I sit at my desk, either working on stuff for clients or writing some blog posts or reaching out to people or doing whatever, that is going to make me grow my business. The more hours I sit here, the more my business is going to grow. That's what I used to think. But then when I understood that, hey, I'm about play and freedom and exploration, I realized that this practice that I've been doing of chaining myself to the desk for 40, 50 hours a week was actually at odds with how I was naturally wired. And so the first thing I did was making more space in my calendar, in my week, for just play and exploration. So the first thing I did, which felt so controversial at the time, was stopped working on Mondays. So I did an experiment. Don't work on Mondays, and instead just have a day free to do whatever I felt like doing. And it was important that I didn't plan what I was going to do on that free day, but to just wake up, do whatever I felt like doing, do the first thing, then the next, and just go with the flow. Oh my God, that was hard. I remember starting to do that and thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? How is this going to help me grow my business? But it did start to open things up. As I started to do that, I realized that more opportunities were coming in my way, and actually it wasn't hurting me at all. So that was one thing that I did. The other thing I did was change the way I was doing a current offering. There was an aspect to how I was running engagements that, God, was just such a drag. And there was a lot of detail analysis and things like that, which isn't what I love doing. And I was a small company. It was really just me. So I removed that part out of my process and really focused on that big picture thinking that I knew was my strength. So that was another thing I did. And finally, kind of more recently, back in 2022, I was feeling like the engagements, the style of messaging engagements that I'd been doing for many years was starting to feel not as fun. Like it was starting to feel a bit rigid. It was starting to feel like hard work. And I thought, how can I offer something that feels more fun? And something I loved doing was running workshops and getting people together and helping them think creatively. And so that was really the genesis of moving into training. As my company, I just started to offer training for marketing teams where we come together in workshops and we get creative and we share our work. And there's so much fun. And really the genesis of that was my desire to do something more fun within my business. now I know that the more fun and the more play and exploration and ease that I have in my business, the better it's going to go for me. So that's something I do. Another thing is related to what I found out in the Kolbe assessment. So I found out that I was a quick start, that I don't need tons of information, and that I have no problem diving into things right away. And I actually thrive in doing things last minute. That's kind of how I roll. And this was huge for me because I kind of always knew that about myself, that I was great doing things last minute, that I didn't need tons of ramp time or prep to do aspects of my work. But it always felt like, well, Emma, you should be prepared and you should give yourself 2 weeks, etc. But I owned how I am, which is someone who thinks on her feet and thrives in doing things last minute. So even how I work, if I have a big presentation or a big workshop, I will prepare for it the day before, even if it's something huge, 1 or 2 days before, because I know that I thrive doing things last minute. Now, that might make you anxious because you're wired differently, but to realize that, hey, it's okay to be a last minute person. It doesn't mean that you're lazy or doing it half-assed. This is just how you are. So it's okay to set your calendar in that way. So that's another thing that I did. So here's what I recommend you trying to do if you haven't already done that. You may already have a pretty good sense of how you're wired, or maybe it's not something you thought about much. So either way, I think it's definitely worth articulating and clarifying how you're wired, kind of what's your vibe, how do you like to do things, and really kind of reflect on how does that gel with the way my life, my career, my business is going right now? Are there any big disconnects there? So if you want to find out how you're wired, you can try the things that I did. So you can do the data-driven approach. I mean, I love an assessment. They're fun. I bet you like assessments too, or quizzes to see like what personality type you are. So you could try the Strengths Finder if you haven't already. That's a great one to do. It's just kind of cool. It makes you feel good about yourself when you see your top strengths and you see them and you're like, yep, that makes total sense. It's like you always knew what they were, but it's nice to have it fed back to you. And plus, they have a lot of nice information around what this could mean and how you might want to bring it into your career. And the second one is the Kolbe assessment. Now, this one I think is really great if you have your own business or you're freelancing, because what it helped me do is not only understand how I'm wired, but it helped me understand that if there were areas that I needed to fill, that was where I needed to hire someone to support me with other areas. So for example, I think one of the Kolbe spectrums was around kind of process, and hey, I suck at process, but there are some processes that are needed in a business. So instead of trying to force myself to do the process and then tell myself how much I suck at doing the process, it's just an easy way to say, oh, okay, I need to bring this into my business. So what external help can I bring into it? And in fact, one of the earliest investments I did do in Punchy was hiring a consultant to come in and start bringing processes into my business so that I could bring in contractors and external help. So it wasn't just some mess in my head, which it had been for many years. But by doing the Kolbe helped me see that, I'm never going to be able to do that. So let me fill the gap with someone who can. So those assessments are great. Now, the other way that I did that I recommend you do is just reflect. You could do this through journaling. You could do this through kind of meditation or just kind of asking yourself questions, which is, who am I on the deepest level? What do I love doing? When do I feel happiest and most free? What are words I would use to describe myself? These are the things you want to ask, and you probably know already. You probably know, but maybe you've forgotten, or maybe you've put it on the back burner, or maybe you've minimized it. But I want you to really think about who you really are and how do you like to show up in this world and what lights you up. For me, it was play and exploration. And I think for many creative people, that sense of play is in all of us. But it might be something different for you. It might be peacefulness. It might be spaciousness. And it could be relationships. It could be something completely different. But really think about, what is it? What am I here to experience, and what makes me happiest? And that is going to point towards your natural wiring. And once you've kind of figured out or clarified how you're wired, think about ways, both big and small, that you can move towards these and bring them into your life, into your business. So, a couple examples. So, maybe if you're working in a job, you're employed, or even in your own business, thinking about how you actually work. So that was a big one for me. I felt like, I have to work 40 hours a week, 9 to 5. I got to sit in the chair. And a lot of that is just the way it's always been done. And I know a lot of that has shifted since the pandemic, when more people are having flexible schedules. But think, how do I like to work? So for me, I told you I like to do things last minute. The other thing that I like to do is short bursts of intense working, and then followed by large spaces of nothing. So for me, a good day is a walk in the morning, and then I do an intense kind of 2 hours on a specific project, and then I go for another long walk. So it's mixing up intense work with space. That's what works for me. But for you, it might be doing deep work later in the night, or earlier in the morning, or organizing meeting days and non-meeting days. But thinking about how can you make your schedule work better for your wiring is a really easy place to start. The next is acknowledging that you are great at these certain things, and that you might need support in other areas. So that's what I realized. I actually need loads of support. You can't just be like the big picture thinker, risk taker, and expect to have a sustainable business. There's a lot of day-to-day details and processes that need to help a business move forward day after day. And so I had to bring in people. So I brought in a consultant who built all the systems. I brought in an account manager who basically makes sure everything keeps running, who does handle all the details so I don't have to. So is that something that you can do if you have your own business? Who can you bring in, or what kind of support can you bring in so that you can be free to do what you are best at? And that could even be at home. If you need more time to just be, or go for a walk, or do something that lights you up, can you get some support? Can someone else drive the kids to practices? Can you do meal service so you're not cooking? Is there something that you can do there? Another thing, if you have a business, is, and this is something I did, which is stop doing things that you hate. So if you have a service, I spoke to an entrepreneur a couple of years ago. We were kind of doing a coaching session, and she was asking me about her deliverables and what she gave to clients. And she said, "Oh, do I have to give them this big full report at the end? It's what I do." And I said, "If you want to, you can. I don't do anything like that. It's up to you." She's like, "I hate doing it." And I said, "God, if you hate doing it, don't do it then." That's the beauty of having a business, that you are in charge of the service offering and how it's delivered. So if there's something that really drains you, either get help, get someone to do it for you, or consider removing it or changing it. So how can you make your service offering something that feels good to you? Which is what I did when I shifted into training. Another thing you could do is create a whole new offering that sounds fun. So if you love to travel, for example, could you try offering some in-person meeting or workshop or retreat in a cool location? If you love face-to-face conversations, can you create some kind of group offering where you're bringing people together? A thing that you could do is maybe just do some daydreaming and thinking like, what would be really cool? What would be really cool? Write down, I don't know, 5, 10, as many things that you think would be cool to do in your business. I've done that exercise a couple of times, and it can be hard to get going, but you come up with some neat ideas that could be really fun to you. So why not try something like that? If you are working at a business, you're employed, or even if you have your own business, consider starting a side project, a passion project, something that feeds you, that really aligns to what you're passionate about. That could really open up doors. It could become something that you can't even imagine until you get to that point. So I think really the takeaway here is that the more your life, your work and life are in alignment with your natural wiring, i.e., who you really are on that deepest soul level, the easier it's going to be, the more successful it's going to be, the more open and free and good you're going to feel. And on the flip side, the farther away when you're living work and life in conflict or in opposition to how you're naturally wired, again, things will feel restricted and tighter and harder and more frustrated, like how I felt in the beginning when I was grinding it out at my desk 40, 50 hours a week. So if you can move into alignment with how you're naturally wired, things will open up. That's what I experienced with my business. My business really started to open up and I got more opportunities. More clients would just come to me when I started living in alignment. It's like the energetic floodgates started to open. This resistance that had been around me started to fade and melt away. And so all of those opportunities, just like I talked about in my previous podcast episode about asking it is given, about this idea that these good opportunities are always trying to reach us, but sometimes we resist them and they can't get to us. So when you live in alignment, you melt away that resistance and those opportunities will come to you. And then when you want to get really advanced with it, you start to realize that your natural wiring is your recipe for success. So for me, I'm continuing to find new ways to add play and exploration and ease into everything I do. And I am definitely not perfect. I tell you that I don't want to work long weeks, and yet there are still weeks and phases in my business where I'm just really busy, too busy for what my natural wiring wants. And then I start to get into that restricted place, and then I just have to course correct. It's like, you know that you should eat your vegetables, but sometimes you just binge on pizza or whatever. So it's something that I'm constantly working on as well, but at least I know that my North Star is play and exploration and taking risks and feeling that sense of freedom. And that really helps me navigate my steps moving forward. I will say, when you live in alignment with your natural wiring, you really don't know where things will go. But I have found in my experience that it will point you on the right path for you naturally. And it might not be something that you ever considered, and it might be better than anything you could have dreamed for yourself. So trust in who you are. Know that it's no accident, that these are strengths, that these are your secret weapon, and they will lead you to a life that feels good and fulfilling very easily if you just let it. So thank you so much for listening today. I would love to hear how this resonates with you on my Substack. Just leave a response or a reply. I'd really love to know how this lands with you and if you've made any steps to try and incorporate this idea of natural wiring into your day-to-day life and work. Hey, my friend, you've been listening to the Emma Stratton Show. If you'd like to follow me in my writing, you can find me on Substack. Thanks again for listening.